2020, Leinster went a full Pro 14 season and calendar year unbeaten. Let's see if they managed it in 2021. Scotland women pulled off a historic draw with France, a result akin in ranking points to Spain drawing with Ireland in men's rugby, and Teddy Thomas did this. But in amongst caring about nothing but Animal Crossing for a month or two and putting off weeding your hideously overgrown island for yet another week, this was a year in which some rugby was played by some people. And so it's time to celebrate the rugby we watched to make us slightly less guilty about not checking in on Stinky and the gang. It's the 2020 Squidge Rugby Team of the Year. And as we approach rounding out completing the team, it's time for the glue that holds the side together. It's the best centres of the year. There were only two men who made both the 2018 and 19 Squidge Rugby Teams of the Year, and with Alan Wynne-Jones dropping out of the 2020 edition, that makes Owen Farrell the only hat-trick holder across World Rugby. And this becomes the most impressive point of all, because whereas Farrell was a key leading light for England and Saracens in 2018 and 19, in 2020 he's perhaps not had the same kind of dominant year. Saracens were relegated, then dumped out of Europe by Racing 92, and Farrell began the international year with possibly the worst half of his career against France. And yet, what he managed in that game, coming back from a disastrous start to slowly return to his usual standards and eventually kick the penalty that might not have won England the game, but did ultimately win them the championship, just summed up Owen Farrell. If anything, it's even more impressive that he could have a less shiny year than the last two and still stand head and shoulders, undoubtedly above all else, as the best in his position. And this isn't to say that Farrell's been subpar. Even by his hefty standards, he's been consistently excellent, but in a kind of quiet way, only pulled off by the very top tier players. He was the top point scorer in Test Rugby this year and ran England's attack with great efficiency while George Ford was injured and Eddie Jones not interested, and executed his coach's new, more conservative tactics near perfectly across the autumn. If you can be world class and nobody notices, you're officially so good that people are bored of you being good. Owen Farrell is that good. And as such, Owen Farrell is in the Team of the Year for a third successive year. I love watching interviews with Emily Scarratt. For one, she's so much sunnier than you'd expect. Just seeing her grin her head off after delivering a player of the match performance in a really tough physical test match makes you realise just what moody pricks most male rugby players are. That all ends if you dare bring up how absolutely incredible she is at rugby. And it's a difficult topic to avoid because Emily Scarratt might be, pound for pound, the best rugby player on the planet of any gender. And yet, you say that in front of her, and she becomes instantly bored and uncomfortable. She becomes stony-faced and tired, but look at the year she just had. Things began with a superb performance in one of the best test matches of the year, in which she scored the try kind of out of nowhere to take the game, and then the conversion as well that sealed it for England. She followed it up by being almost unplayable when she touched the ball across the Six Nations. Even when heavily marked, she was able to free up so much space for others, and she then finally captained the Red Rose to the final game that sealed a second successive Grand Slam, and then played in 2 wins over those local rivals, the French, including securing a tight win over a French team that were completely on top in the final play at Twickenham, kicking the penalty in the 80-something or other minute to win the match and show a typical lack of concern over how incredibly good she is at rugby. It's easy to look at the stuff she does in attack, splitting the line using her pace, delivering pinpoint passes with no time or space, but every component is as solid as can be. Her defence is excellent, her kicking superb, her understanding of when to use her talent rather than just going, I'm Emily Scarratt, na, which is exactly what I'd do if I was 4% as good as her. She's virtually the perfect rugby player. I'm really sorry to say this, Emily, but you're incredible, and a lot of eyes will be on you heading into the World Cup next September. Speaking of incredible, there's this other lad called Semi Radradra, who's kind of alright. He plays with Bristol, I'm not sure many people have noticed. He's sort of like Emily Scarratt if you swap the kicking game for a really cool beard. He was very much in contention, as was England and Exeter's Henry Slade, who was possibly the standout 13 in the men's international game this year. Carlo Canna, by the way, is a 12 now, and we better get used to it because it turns out he's actually a really good one and is beginning to form a lovely partnership with Marco Zanin for Italy. Bundy Aki was consistently excellent whilst Gary Ringrose spent too much time injured, but if he'd kept that form up, he really could have pushed for a shirt, and he'll surely do the same for the Lions this year. Chris Harris, likely won't be in Lions contention, but he really proved a lot of people, myself included, wrong by being excellent and consistent for Scotland. Arthur Van Saun, meanwhile, is the most mature 20-year-old centre I've ever seen. He won his first cap in the Six Nations, yet played like he had somewhere between 80 and 150 caps of blood and brutality under his belt. The lad is already Montpellier's captain at age 21, and I would not be surprised to see him lead France into the 2023 World Cup, where he'll likely be playing alongside Remy Vakatawa, who was unbelievable for Racing. And whilst he couldn't quite translate the unplayability factor across the French shirt, he was still very, very excellent and hugely scary to face. He's extremely good and was probably second choice pick for this 15. Further south, Noti Lamarpe was brilliant, but like Ringrose, suffered for fitness when the test season rolled around. But Jack Goodhue did do a very nice job of adapting to 12, as did Hunter Paisami, who strikes the balance between calm and chaos very nicely indeed in the Wallaby midfield. Bonus honourable mention to World Cup favourite Ramil Gaisin, who was excellent in the Russian league and seems to reinvent rugby with his incredible range of different little dinks and kicks and accurate goal kicking.